This was not a video I planned on making, at least not for a while. But with the recent shutting down of the Wii U and 3DS internet, it's been fresh in my mind again, and it's something that I need to get out there before I go back to my normal videos. In my Final Fantasy video, I mentioned that I really hate the modern gaming industry. It's a constant barrage of unfinished messes, microtransaction-filled slogs, and just horrid executives running all of it. It's a bubble so fragile that it's already starting to burst, and who's getting punished? The people who barely make enough to get by and didn't make any of the decisions that would have made that bubble pop. What's kind of funny though is that Nintendo, the main subject of this video, hasn't contributed to that side that much. It's got trashy live services with some of the worst microtransactions, but those are such side games that most people choose to ignore them, myself included. But Nintendo is still scummy as hell, just in a weirder, more subtle way. I kept thinking of how exactly to describe Nintendo in short terms. Originally, I wanted to say hypocritical, and while I do still agree with that to an extent, the best way I can personally describe it is that it's kind of a weird monkey's paw of a company. What I mean is Nintendo had and still has some of the most high quality products in the industry. Even their failed console, the Wii U, has so many great games that for years they've been ported to Switch and have each sold millions. However, with each good game, with each good decision, with each positive thing to come of it, there is always some kind of snag. Sometimes those snags are gigantic, sometimes they aren't, but this video is meant to show some of those snags and why as a whole it shows how little Nintendo gives a shit about both its fans and its customers. And how I don't think it's that far from sinking to the levels of other game companies. I think the most obvious issue that everyone sees is the way that Nintendo prices their games. It doesn't matter if it's a spin-off with not a lot of content, or a fully fledged game, or an HD remaster of a game, $60. Or potentially nowadays, $70. Look at Mario Odyssey. This game is so polished and so well made that I am more than willing to pay $60 for it at launch. But now look at Mario Tennis Aces. A good game, I like it quite a bit, and it had plenty of free updates and it ended up solid. But in what universe is a game like this costing the same amount as a game like this ever justifiable? Not only that, but even 5+ years past launch, both are still $60. You know what other Nintendo games are $60? All of them. It doesn't matter if one was clearly a budget title while another was a game with years of time dedicated to it. There's a lot of theories why, but here's my 2 cents. I think it's partially because Nintendo knows their history and knows they have a massive fan base willing to shell out $60 no matter the game. They also know that by making it clear that they won't lower prices, people will buy all of their stuff day one. And finally, it's to lessen secondhand sales. I'll get to this more in a sec, but Nintendo hates the idea of people who aren't them selling their games. And by not lowering prices, it makes used copies cost a lot more, to the point where you're more willing to spend the extra $10 or so for brand new. What's even more infuriating is that half the time, Nintendo doesn't even want you to play their games. What do I mean? Well, for example, I want to play the game Tomodachi Life. It's a very charming little 3DS game that, of course, understandably, is now out of print. Now, I could go on eBay, or to a used game store, or I could open up my DS right now and go to the eShop and get the game there for only $20. Except now, since last year, I can't. This is where the most stupidity lies, is I have the money to buy the game. I want Nintendo to take it, but they refuse. So instead, what would be the easiest way to get and play the game today? Well, I don't want to pay the incredibly high prices that this game goes for now, and even then, I don't want to wait for shipping. So you know what I'm gonna say? Emulation. Hell, hack a 3DS. Pirate it. This is getting easier with each day, and there's less reasons not to do it each day as well. However, this really ruffles their jammies, as Nintendo is constantly going nuts trying to shut these emulators and hackers down so that nobody can get to these games. I get that they're in their right to do so, but in the end, people were willing to pay for these games and Nintendo refused. I'm not even saying they need these games to be on store shelves. I'm saying they could have just kept the eShops up. Nintendo is a multi-billion-dollar company. A couple of already poorly optimized online shops are literal pennies to them. But no, they don't want your money for these games anymore. So you shouldn't even want to play them. Or maybe you should play the new games on the Switch instead. And this is where stuff gets truly scummy to me. Let me give you another example. Oh boy, they released Metroid Prime 1 on Switch in HD. Ooh, but it's $40. Okay, you know what? Instead, I'll get Metroid Prime Trilogy on Wii U. That's all 3 games for $20. Oh, wait. I can't get those anymore. And the only legal way to get Metroid Prime 1 on a modern console now is the $40 version. Or what about Majora's Mask? That game's great. Oh, it's on the eShop for $10. Well, how can I play it now? Oh, instead of paying $10 for the one game I want that I get to keep on my Wii U forever, I have to pay $50 per year just to play it on Switch. And yeah, you get other shit with it, but there's a reason none of these games are available on their own anymore, because then you might end up forking over less cash to play them. I just want to play one of these games, not all of them. Again, the easiest answer to this is piracy and emulation, which is why Nintendo is cracking down on that shit, because they want the final word on when these games should and shouldn't be purchasable or playable. Gabe Newell, Valve CEO, has said that piracy is a service problem, meaning that piracy isn't just used by people who don't want to pay for games. It's used by people who want access to games and don't have it. Again, Nintendo can sue however they want, it's their right, but it's completely hypocritical to not even be willing to have a platform selling these games and then get upset when people pirate them instead. Piracy is the only real competition Nintendo has when it comes to their legacy content, which is why we shouldn't just sit down and swallow the bullshit the company is doing even if we like their games. It's disrespectful to the medium and disrespectful to the fans. Speaking of which, how often has Nintendo disrespected fans? AM2R, a complete fan-made labor of love that Nintendo shut down because they were afraid that people might not buy Samus Returns and play this literally completely different game instead. We want to buy their product, but Nintendo doesn't want to sell it. So why should they be upset when we get it ourselves? And this is where we get back to that original point, despite how conspiratorial it sounds. Keep in mind, I fully believe this. Nintendo thinks that if it doesn't sell a specific game anymore, you shouldn't want it. As weird as that sounds, we've already heard multiple game publishers saying gamers shouldn't get used to owning their games. They've always hated things like secondhand stores for this reason. But here's the thing, they sell products. They're businesses that sell us an item, and once that transaction is done, it's not theirs anymore. Obviously, it's because they want that continuous flow of cash from us, and not just that one-time purchase. But obviously, fuck that. I don't want to play Pokemon Sword right now. I want to play Crystal, and I would, and I have paid for it. But if they won't take my money, I'll just download a ROM. I want a standalone download of Mario 64, but if they're not going to give it to me, I'll download a ROM. But there's one other big reason seeing Nintendo shut all of this stuff down depresses me. It's very subjective, but in my eyes, it's very important. When I was around 14 or 15 in the 2010s, I went to a game store and used some birthday money to buy a Nintendo 64, a controller, and a few games. As I sat down and plugged it all into an old CRT TV I no longer own, I had a thought of, wow, it's so cool that I get to experience the feelings of people in the 90s who are in this exact scenario. And what depresses me is that with these shutdowns, people can't do that anymore with these consoles. Setting aside my personal love for the Wii U for a second, the 3DS is an incredibly beloved console, and it is still more than worth picking up one to play some of these fantastic games that are still exclusive to it. However, nobody can experience the feeling of using a 3DS at its prime anymore, because Miiverse is dead. Because you can't get those digital games anymore, and because you can't play any of them with friends over the internet anymore. And yeah, I guess that's part of gaming in an online age, but it really never had to be. Again, it really wouldn't have costed much to keep these shops up and running, to do the literal zero server maintenance Nintendo does on games like Mario Maker 1 and Splatoon. But it's easier to get us to pay more or make us beg for products if they abandon the consoles. And I really hate that. As happy as I am that the Thousand Year Door is getting a remake, I hate that it was so surprising because of our expectations that Nintendo had abandoned that game and other games like it. I hate that that's just something we've swallowed. And yeah, I don't really have a solution. This video was kind of me just shouting my grievances into the aether. I just don't think it's right to sit back and let these games be abandoned because the company who made them decided we didn't want them anymore. I still enjoy Nintendo games. I'm looking forward to some Nintendo games this year, and I'm probably, as you're listening to this, playing some games on my Switch. But that doesn't mean I'm just going to consume and not question why all of this stuff is happening. Just remember a couple things for me. It's really easy to emulate or hack a 3DS or Wii U. One Google search is all you need. Piracy is also a victimless crime, and also I'm never coming back.